Hey, Andrew Davis, and you are watching Conversations in Pop Culture, brought to you by my sponsor, Mixum Printing, the smarter way to print. Printing your creative projects can be confusing and stressful, but Mixum is here to make it easy. From their instant quote calculator that lets you get as many quotes as you want for free to their 24-hour customer service support, Mixum is here to make sure your printing experience runs smoothly from start to finish. You can choose from a range of premium printing options and materials, and the company has also printed many Kickstarter campaigns, and many of them you've actually heard, and a bunch of people that I've interviewed have used Mixum, and they say very nice things, and Mixum produces an amazing product. And so they offer services in the United States, Canada, Australia, and the UK, and Mixum can print and reach your audience around the world. So if you're ready to print smarter, not harder, head over to Mixum.com. And right now they're running a promotion where listeners of my show can drop my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tab of a current order to get 5% discount on their first order. And believe me, a 5% discount or any percentage discount is super important when you are counting your pennies and you're just trying to make your budget work for you, whether you're running a Kickstarter or printing any type of comic. Every percentage point counts. So that is Mixam.com. Again, type my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tab of your current order to receive a 5% discount on your first order. And so I have with me comic creator Jay Mooers. So welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Andrew. Good to be here.
Yeah, no, I am super excited. And obviously, we got introduced due to Rusty Gilligan, which I'm very appreciative. And I know that you do a bunch of work for Rusty and a bunch of stuff. And obviously, we're going to talk about Eden Park Tales with Autumn Gray and Illweed and Scales and Sand. But before we do, I want to talk about trading cards because you've done a bunch of them at this point. And I know we might be doing some of this slightly out of order, but I think the best place to start is talking about what you've done for Dynamite. And there's a particular set that I want to start with that I think everybody sort of knows a little bit about, and that's the Kiss sketch cards.
Okay. Well, I'll start by saying the Kiss sketch cards from Dynamite were actually the first sketch cards I have ever done for any company. That was 2 years ago. And it opened up a floodgate where I now do, hundreds and hundreds of sketch cards. It's kind of my in-between. Like every project I have, I'm like, all right, I'm going to take a break. And for my break, I am going to do 3 sketch cards. It's like the filler. It's the frosting and the art cake.
And so to even talk about this, how did you even get into the sketch card game? Because obviously card collecting in the last 2 years has gotten bigger than anything else has gotten. Whether that's COVID related, whether that's just a bunch of people coming in. Obviously, I'm a Pokemon collector. I have a lot of friends who are baseball card collectors. And now, obviously, people are venturing outward. And it's always sort of gone through waves. But how did you even get involved? And how did Dynamite approach you? And how did all of this come about? Because it is so interesting when you're dealing with things like Kiss or you're dealing with comic sketch cards. Because it's a little bit off the beaten path, but it's like become a hell of a lot more mainstream in the last 2-3 years as well.
First, I just want to add a little disclaimer that I do have 2 little dogs that are right now battling each other around my feet. So if you hear growling and snarling, it is coming from around my feet. So all of a sudden I get pulled down, red sprays go everywhere. The dogs have destroyed me. You guys can be witnesses to that. So something to look forward to. But anyway, so the Kiss cards, I got involved. These ones here. This was... I had been looking to get into something. I was looking to expand from the indie comic market into something with more licensed materials. So I reached out to a friend of mine who works for Marvel, DC all the time, Mark McKenna. I don't know if you know who he is, but he inks a lot of work for.
I know who he is.
And he actually told me to get in touch with Dynamite. He had a connection there, and I reached out and said, hey, I know Mark. And they actually come back and said, hey, I used to be roommates with Mark in New York. So boom, I was in. So he got me involved with the first set. And it just kind of avalanched from there. I started with the Kiss cards. Then I went to Deja Thoris. If anyone doesn't, they don't know, it's the Queen of Mars from the John Carpenter series.
I'm seeing if I can pull it up. That's not the right one.
You got so many of them. Yeah, so that was my second one.
There we go.
Then
so to even talk about that, because obviously, sticking on Kiss for 1 second, because
okay, let's go back to Kiss. I'm sorry.
Kiss. It's the idea that what was that even like to do those? Because obviously it's a big licensed product. Dynamite has, I think right now, the license to Kiss. I know they're producing Kiss. I just went on and bought a bunch of comics on preview online, and obviously it's so iconic that it doesn't just appeal to comic fans.
Right.
At this point. Now we're going into a bigger marketplace, because comics are a very small marketplace. And so what is that like to be trusted to deal with something like that? Because not taken away from any other thing you've done, but that's probably one of the biggest things Dynamite owns that's not comic related that they're going to work on and put out there. So you can be trusted. I mean, it must be very cool, but also a little bit nerve wracking, because if you fuck it up,
so it was my first big name license that I was working under. I've done a lot of book covers for smaller publishers. I've done a ton of comic work for indie comics. So this was my first like licensed big name project, and I was very, very intimidated right at the beginning there, and it took a little while to get used to, because I was like, oh my god, I'm actually drawing for the band Kiss, And of course, people are like, "Oh, did you go meet them for the pictures?" I'm like, "No."
And even still, though, the fact that you're associated with it is very cool.
Yes.
And obviously, I'm assuming, and I don't know the full details, and we're not going to get too tangled in the weeds, but I'm sure Kiss sort of has the final approval on some of this. And Dynamite also is very protective. And I'm presuming nothing was sent back. So that's usually
I didn't get any complaints at all from that set. So
which means
they win.
Complaints, others. And then obviously talking about the Queen of Mars, because that's another one as well. And this is where we start getting a little bit more niche down, because Deja Thoris is obviously more comic oriented, John Carpenter type esque. And obviously this is very much a staple at Dynamite right now.
Right. Yeah, between that and other ones I've done a bunch of, like Vampirella, Chaos. You probably have most of the cards ready to flip through anyway on a lot of Dynamite stuff.
So what was this like? Because obviously there's certain things you could do with Deja Thoris that you can't do with Vampirella. And obviously this also hits a very different niche, where obviously I didn't know who Deja Thoris was until about 3 years ago, and I'm 28, and so now my maturity level in comics has shifted out of more DC and Marvel into Dynamite and companies like Zenescope. And obviously I don't know the full demographic of Deja Thoris, but I would not give an 8-year-old Deja Thoris.
No. So this was the first project I was ever on where I was drawing scantily clad women, which is a common theme in sketch card collectors. They do like their scantily clad women. So
I mean, if you look close enough, there's some provocative images here. I mean,
there are.
I don't have a censor bar, so hopefully we get in trouble. But it's the idea that
they're all covered, barely, but they're covered.
It's pushing the line here very much.
But they're metal pasties. Come on, they're like bulletproof.
I mean, if you're going to go into combat naked, you need some protection somewhere.
There's some protection somewhere.
There's not a CVS around. I'm just saying.
It's brutal up on Mars. No CVS, no not even a Walmart. So,
God forbid, no Walmart. But even the idea that, getting all back to seriousness, it's very different when you're drawing, obviously, very semi-naked women to some degree, and putting that out there into the sketch thing, and also making it look artistic, making it look classy, how it's supposed to look, and not just being very pornographic.
Right.
I'm sure there are sketch cards that are that, but obviously
There are,
Dynamite.
and I hope you're not going to put some of those up because I have been involved in some of the more risque card collections out there.
There's one on eBay that's going for $40. I can tell you that.
Does it have to do with a car wash or
I
succubus?
think it has to do with Cherry being eaten by like a dinosaur.
Oh, okay. Yes. Yep.
And so, what was this like really pushing this out? Because obviously this is a big forte into more of what Dynamite does and what Dynamite pushes out there for the first time.
Like I said, it was the first time I was drawing things like this. I mean, I've certainly looked at pictures like that before, but this was the first time I was actually hired to draw risque pictures. And at the moment, it was like, oh my God, I actually have to I have to research. I'm sorry, I got to research. The wife would walk in. What are you doing? I'm like, I'm researching.
And so that's
and it was legitimate research.
And my understanding of Dynamite, and it's been a while, that Dynamite obviously has very provocative comic covers.
Yes.
I don't know if Dynamite, though, does nude covers the same way that a Zenescope does nude covers or a Boundless comic does nude covers.
I think they, so far, everything I've done with Dynamite has had, you can't go nude. You can go as close to nude. They want you to go as close to nude as possible, but they don't want nude.
And so versus a company like Zenescope, and obviously I have a relationship with Zenescope. They happen to like me. I happen to like them as a company, and I've interviewed a bunch of artists from there. They do a Z cover, which is their thing. Boundless Comics does nudity, but I don't think Dynamite. I think they pushed the line, but it's very interesting in that regard. And then obviously this is another set to just throw up there, and this is what I think for 50 years of Vampirella, which is crazy in of its own right. I think.
So over the past 3 years, I have done actually 4 sets of Vampirella cards between Dynamite and then Fivefinity got the license from Dynamite to do Vampirella cards, so I did some through them. Vampirella, and then there's some Vampirellas mixed in that last one you were just going through.
I'm finding the others here. I'm not doing very good at it. I'm clearly failing here. Clearly. So I'm going to quit while I'm ahead.
A whole bunch of heads right there.
And so what was that like, though, really to get to do the Vampirella cards and really get to do the 50 years and do a bunch of different sets and do all this different posing of Vampirella and really getting to play with her? Because when you have 50 years of a character, and obviously there's a bunch of different Vampirellas that I'm showing right now in this set, and you're showing a lot of cool stuff, and also even just like the one that's upside down, and then the one where she's more, with her butt a little bit more up, and obviously, covered in blood, and all sorts of stuff, like getting to play with her character, because over 50 years, Vampirella has evolved tremendously.
Yes, yep. With that said, Vampirella, unlike Deja Thoris, who I didn't know and I had to research in order to do the cards, I knew who Vampirella was. So I was like, now I'm working on a comic set I'm familiar with, and it's one that most people I know are familiar with. So I'm like, hey guys, I'm working on Vampirella. They're like, what? You're doing what?
And it is cool because obviously people who love Vampirella, and this is something that I think people don't understand about Dynamite, is that once people get into Dynamite and they get into a character like Red Sonja or Vampirella, and then Dynamite's unleashing a bunch of new characters as of lately, people really want to follow those characters. And, and I think Red Sonja and Vampirella are really two of Dynamite's big forefronts.
Right.
And Barbarella, I think it is sort of becoming a third in a lot of ways, that they become indoctrinated in, and they love seeing all this stuff. And so it's very much a cult following Dynamite has built.
Right.
And that's why these cards are very cool, because they're really placating, I feel, not necessarily to somebody who's a flipper, but to somebody who is a collector and wants to enjoy it and is not looking to, sell it up on eBay per se. And that's why,
some of them still do that.
Yeah, people still do it. But the idea that I think is really happening is that this is really more of a product, I think, for collectors versus, sellers or resellers. And it's very cool. And so as an artist and doing all this stuff, I mean, it seems that's where the trend is, at least with this stuff. And what is that like for you that people say, I really want to appreciate this because I like these characters and I want this in my collection?
Right. And now the way sketch cards work, and I'm sure other people have told you, is we get artist proof cards for working on the sets, which then we can do what we will with. And I sold out quickly on my Kiss AP cards, and I also sold out on my Vampirella Dynamite cards pretty quickly. Those are both like instantly recognized. People contacted me right away, wanted pictures of those done. So,
and so what is that like for you? Because obviously, money's good and money's fun, and on top of it,
it's the beer money, right? We were talking about that before we started filming. You need your beer money.
It's your bonus is really what it is. But even
when you're working, when you're doing sketch cards, I mean, you don't make much on the cards you do for the set. Essentially, what you're doing is you're promoting yourself in the set, and you're getting a handful of cards that then the collectors see your cards in the set, and then they want cards, and they reach out to you, and that's where you can make decent money as a sketch card artist.
And it's also commissions and other things that can come out of that. And then also, other publishers look at this stuff too, because it's also a gigantic advertisement in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and they all know each other. So like if you do something really nice for one company, other companies are noticing it. So that's kind of how it started. That's when I started with Dynamite, and then I got involved with Fifinity and then Rusty's cards. And I think I'm involved in 5 or 6 other card companies as well.
And so before we get into all that, I do want to show, obviously, quickly the Betty Page stuff, because this is some of the nicest stuff, I feel. And no, my elf is not in the card. I want to make that crystal clear.
Although she looks kind of like appropriate up in the corner there.
If she had a halo, it would be so fitting. It'd be so fitting. But it's the idea that that's out there. And then also there's another cool thing that's out there. And I think I'm about to drop it. Now, that's the Kiss stuff right there. I'm really not doing well here, guys. Clearly, all my images are not functioning. And I'm probably getting everything wrong here. So, here it is. This is the one I wanted to point out as well. And this is Fallout. And that's another one that's really cool, because that, again, is also very much like Kiss, where it's outside the normal Dynamite stuff.
So the challenge there was we had to make 10 cards the same. They would approve one design for 10 cards. So the challenge was to redraw the same card over and over again, keeping it similar, but still like finding ways to make it a little unique.
I can imagine that could get annoying in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I had to get very creative with creating like a template that I had to make sure I made copies of, because if it wore out while I was using it, I'd have to have like a fresh version to use. It was a little extra challenging, and honestly, like, it was a little frustrating having to draw the same exact image multiple times.
I could imagine, but also it's very cool to work on Fallout.
And that's why I was like, I'm doing it. Yeah, Fallout was great.
I'm not the biggest Fallout guy per se, but I appreciate it. I have an entire shirt design that I might as well show that's based off of Fallout at this point. And so that's my shirt design, totally self-promoting here.
There you go.
It is a semi-rip off of that design where you have, Fallout, and he's, having the thumbs up in the circle.
Yep, it's your own Pip-Boy.
And so there you go. That's what I pulled out of Fallout Boy. And then, or not Boy, Fallout. Wow, I'm really just not playing. There should be something in this drink, but there's not. And then obviously the other few cards I want to talk about are obviously some of this, and obviously we got some Red Sonja in there. We obviously have,
I have to say, the Chaos ones, I had so much fun drawing. Like I just, like I'd done a bunch of sets before that, but for just some reason, the style, like especially like Evil Ernie, I had so much fun drawing him, and just like because it's kind of a looser style, which is closer to like my own style. It just kind of.
Speaking of Evil Ernie, you can actually get the Dynamite's rebooting it for December, and issue 1 is up for pre-order, guys. So if you're interested in Evil Ernie,
not a sponsor, but check it out.
and so that's out there. And then obviously this right here is very cool with some of the Red Sonja and some other Vampirella and a bunch of other cool stuff. And I think Shirana, or I can't speak.
Sheena.
Yes.
Sheena of the jungle.
She's up there. And so obviously a lot of cool stuff is in there. And then obviously looking at these, and then we have the Women of Cosplay stuff as well. And so that's something that's very cool, where we have these, and there's a bunch of them, and even doing this. So what was that like, really getting to play with a lot of those characters?
Right. The neat thing about that set is it came after I had already done the Vampirella set and the Deja Thora set. So the cosplay one was kind of like a chance for me to challenge myself to do more detailed, like more contrasty, just like tighter versions of the characters I had previously done.
And also it's really cool because it's obviously cosplay, and cosplay has gotten a hell of a lot bigger in the last 30 years as well.
Oh yeah,
it's Dynamite.
Some conventions are like pretty much for the cosplay. You go and you're like, oh, this is a cosplay convention. Okay.
and Dynamite has contributed partially to that, because you look at, they have Deja Thoris, they have Vampirella cosplays, they have Sheena cosplay now covered.
A lot of the iconic women's outfits are from Dynamite, or Dynamite owns them now. So a lot of like Dynamite, a lot of the franchises Dynamite owns existed before Dynamite owned them, and they basically, once they've gone silent, Dynamite will pick them up and like give them a rebirth, and that's what happened like with Vampirella and John Carter and Deja Thoris, and most of these franchises are things that they picked up and revitalized.
And then a bunch of cosplayers obviously, go to these characters, and then Dynamite notices, and then they put them on covers. A few people who have been on this show have been on covers, and it's very, very cool what's going on with that, and even just getting to do it, because it just adds such a layer to these cards.
So, and before you have to ask, I have not modeled in cosplay for a cover of a Dynamite comic. I know it's a big surprise. I look really great in one of those Vampirella one-piece suits there. So
hey, Dynamite is slightly sexist. I would love a John Carter cover with like a male cosplayer. That would be fantastic. That would be great, and it would make so much sense.
Or even like a Evil Ernie cosplay, I think would look great.
That too. I'll be down for it. I would be the first to buy it. And you know what? I would buy it just for the sake, because I think it's an awesome idea. And equal rights, equal fights, guys.
That's right. Exactly.
And I think you should be the model. I think it should just be your cover. You should put down the pen, the paper.
I have to work out a little bit, I think. I shouldn't have had pizza for dinner.
I'm just saying, it can work here. It can work. It's progress. We're a progressive show, clearly.
Clearly, totally.
So having said all that, I really do like these things, and these are off of eBay, so you can actually buy these 3 right now on eBay, and no, they are not mine. So I don't know whose they are.
Just so you know, the Red Sonja armor is done in metallic markers. You can't see it so much in these photos, but when you hold the card, the armor's shiny.
That's actually super cool. So what is that even like? Because obviously that changes the way a sketch card is done. That changes, obviously, the experience for whoever has it. It affects the value, and even just getting to do some cool stuff like that on a card is kind of fun, right? Because obviously it is important to, make something different, either whether it's for a collector or for somebody saying, hey, I want to keep this in my collection for 5 years, and now it's time to let it go. This is what this card does, because there's a lot of trading cards out there. And I know that, Dynamite's not the only one who's pushing things out. And so what is that like to say, okay, look, I got to sort of change the game a little bit? and make this a little bit shinier, a little bit different, make it stand out.
Make something to make the card itself more exciting than just a picture of the card. You know, it's I mean that's the whole thing to a sketch card anyway, because a sketch card is a unique original piece of artwork. So no matter what, if you have one, no one else has that. That's it. That's the one and only. I know a lot of people collect, like they pick out artists that they think are going to make it big. You know, it's kind of like an investment. Like I'm going to hang on to this card because if this guy becomes what I think he's going to be, I have a sketch card he did before he was what I think he's going to be, you know?
It's the idea, same thing with commissions in a lot of ways, where it's just betting on people. I mean, one of my business models with this entire show is that you might say, hey, you know, I'm interviewing a bunch of people who don't look like they're anywhere. They're starting out indie. And I have no problem openly saying it, because if I interview 100 people, statistically, one or two of those people are going to make it big. And so it's something that I want to get there first. And it's happened to me with wrestlers. And I'm a big wrestling fan, where there have been people who have been in WWE who have gone from the indie scene, who've been on my show, who have gone to WWE and are still in WWE because I was there first. And it's very important to understand that. And obviously sketch cards do that. And they're very, very cool in that regard. And then speaking about cool sketch cards, this is another one. I think it's yours.
That is, yep.
And so this is obviously Lady Death.
Yep.
Which is awesome because the Lady Death sketch cards go for good money. And
yeah, those ones don't stay on eBay very long.
This one is not from eBay, actually. I just Googled, and I don't know whose this is. Pulled it off of Google, and it's super interesting. And so what was this like? Because this is another iconic, you know, female character that is not owned by one of the big two.
Right.
And getting to work on something like this, just from a fan perspective,
I had the same feelings with this that I got when I started the Vampirella. I'm like, I'm actually working on Lady Death. What? This was card series through Fivefinity. And I think I did 50 cards first whack. I didn't want to miss out. So I certainly ended up with a big stack of cards to do. And I haven't seen many of them reappear anywhere. So people decided to hang on to them, which is a good sign.
and they're very cool, and I love the fact that it's very detailed for a very small piece of artwork, and you immediately know what it is from across the room, which is very cool about this one in particular. Not to say that the others aren't that, but this is very iconic, and it's also, you know, almost like white, you know, pale skin Lady Death versus more human Lady Death, and it's a little bit more old school Lady Death as well. And that's something that's also really cool about this, is that it's definitely more of an old school feel than a new school feel.
Yeah, I like the old school look of Lady Death. I think most of the cards I did the old school style with the really, really white skin.
And then backing out of you know sort of the Dynamite stuff, you've done a bunch of other things, and obviously Cherry and Friends and the LED card.
So I don't know if you're aware of this, but the Cherry cards. If people who are watching don't know what Cherry comic is, it is one of the most successful independent adult
Larry Welts,
comic
right?
series. Yes, Larry Welts.
I know who he is. I know all about it. And then I'm an old school underground comics guy, way before my time. I'm 28, but I've gotten deep down inside, Dennis Kitchen down inside.
Yeah, I remember his comics floating around the dorm back in college, back in the 90s. So the fun thing about Larry and the Cherry comic is I ended up landing, he liked my cards and he reached out to me, and I am now the official colorist of his classic comics. So I am coloring his original comics. They're going to be doing like a Kickstarter and such. But so that's one of those examples where doing some cards somewhere, somebody noticed, and then boom, next thing you know, I'm working with the original artist coloring his comics, which is something I have to be careful about doing when my grandchildren come to visit me in my art studio.
So to talk about that, because obviously, you're coloring his comics, and are you going like the old school and it's almost like you're rebooting it, or is it the continuation of the new stuff, or what
It's
exactly?
the original old stuff. We're rebooting it in color because originally all his comics were in black and white. There were no gray tones or anything to them. They're just strict black and white. And now I worked with him on a close to flat style, but I like to add a lot of extra to my coloring when I color. So I was able to find like a middle ground where he really liked it, but I got to add a little bit of flavor, a little extra flavor to the coloring. And we've done quite a lot of pages already.
Because the reason why I ask this is that it gets very tricky because you don't want to be insulting.
Yes. So everything I've done, I've had to show him and get approval and adjust things accordingly. And I guess he's very picky about this sort of stuff because it's his baby, and he's letting me mess around with his baby.
And it's also the idea that you also want to keep it the way it's supposed to be kept.
Yes.
Meaning that there's an old guard from the underground comics days, and you don't want to insult the work, and you
Correct.
also don't want to taint the new generation. And then they look back and then they see the underground stuff, right. And then they're reading both of it, and then they feel like they've been cheated because it could be very upsetting. To a lot of people, it could be upsetting to the old school. It could taint the new generation, and it could create a whole bunch of problems. And there's a lot of stuff that happens with this. Obviously, I come from, obviously Howard Cruz, before he passed away, was on my show. And obviously very much underground. Trina Robbins been on, and a few other people, Dennis Kitchen, who is, Mr. Underground Comics in a lot of ways. Yep. Obviously Comic Book Legal Defense Fund, Underground Comics 101. And so it is very cool, though, and it's also the idea that I feel like obviously you're showing him what you're doing, and so paying tribute, but even still, like, what is that like? Because you're bridging a gap in a lot of ways.
Yes. So the trick was I've actually have some experience in this from my own comic. The black and white comic has a certain feel to it. You open it up and you experience the black and white comic, and the trick was to color it. But so I wanted to still have that same feeling when you opened it. Honestly, like the coloring makes it easier to read than the black and white, but I didn't want to lose that quality. So I worked with him. We worked out the colors and everything. So we've shown it to some other people, and they think it's really good that it just enhances without altering the original comic. And oh boy, some of the things I had to color were very not progressive. There's a lot of things in there that I had to color. I'm like, I can never show this to anybody.
I'll put it in a nice way that my audience will understand. This is so not Zenoscope Z-rated cover oriented. It's pretty much erotica. Pretty much,
right. But and even putting the erotica aside, a lot of the strong stereotypes and personalities that certain characters and ethnicities and everything in this are extremely dated. And it's a little bit of a stomach turn to be sitting there polishing something that could get me crucified.
But at the same time, there are some amazing covers. There's a few covers where Cherry's in the gym, and it's a very different gym than the people understand, and it's a great cover in so many ways. And I don't think that cover is offensive to as far as ethnicity.
If you know what Cherry is, you can't be offended by it. You know what it is. It's kind of like nowadays if you're watching The Office, there's even stuff in there that you couldn't make these days. Like it's just you have to understand when it was made, what it was, and what it is. As long as you understand that, also fine.
The audience that's reading Cherry knows what they're reading, versus the idea that you don't just stumble upon Cherry.
I know you do if you find it in the bottom drawer of somebody's closet. You're like, what's this? Oh, I think it's how we all
I'll put it a
discovered
different way. I'll put it a different way. So that could happen. I'm sure it has, and I'm sure it's either made somebody you really want to draw comics or it's turned them off. It's one or the other. But you wouldn't find Cherry in a comic shop just in a back issue bin if it's an appropriate, well-run shop,
Right.
Because it wouldn't be in the shop. It would be in an adult section,
Right.
and
It would be in a
forewarned.
sealed folder. You know, maybe you could see the cover and that be it.
Yeah, you wouldn't see something like that unguarded or unwarned because it's just one of those things. But I digress right there. I'm actually
so
super.
to go back to the point, yes, I did. I've done a couple card series based on Cherry and her friend LED, and it kind of opened up a gate for me to work with Larry on his comic.
And so it's going to be super exciting when that thing drops. And obviously, the Kickstarter comes out. I am probably going to be a customer if I have money and if I ever get.
As soon as it drops, I'm gonna shout it out right to you. I'll tag you on it and be like, "There it is, go get it."
Please tag me in because I'm absolutely. I want to be backer one on that thing.
There you go.
First, I digress right there. I'm sure there's other people gunning for that spot too. But obviously, I do want to talk about 3 more cards, and I know you've done a bunch more. But obviously, we have to talk about Rusty, and obviously, I don't know how you know Rusty. Rusty made the recommendation that I reach out to you, obviously, and you commented on that stuff that in that interview with me and Rusty, and I think you've done an Oz set with Rusty. And worked on a few of those cards. You've done the COVID cards, which are cool because a bunch of that went to charity.
Yeah.
And obviously there's this going on, I think, with that. Where there's some cool fantasy, you know. And then you also did dinosaurs, and who doesn't love dinosaurs? And dinosaur trading cards have been around forever.
Yeah. Well, they should be. I mean, dinosaurs are pretty old school.
I mean, yeah. That's a dad joke. I don't know if you have kids, but that's a perfect.
I have grandkids, so I'm allowed to make dad jokes.
So you clearly well played, sir. Well played. It took me a minute. But what was this like getting to work with Rusty? Because Rusty's been in the industry forever in one form or another, and has done everything pretty much there is, and obviously doing that cool stuff. And I think you have some special cards in that Dino set as well.
So I've known Rusty for probably 10 years now. I met him doing the Comic-Cons, and he's a great guy. He's like the nicest guy in the world at Comic-Cons. Everybody knows him as the friendliest guy in the world, and he gets involved in everything because he likes to help everything, and he loves being involved in everything. So he and I were both working on Dynamite set, and we'd start bouncing our ideas off each other. And I think that's around the time we started getting the habit of he's like the only guy I talk to every day. Like, he gets up in the morning, "Hey Jay, you know, let's get a text message." And we always chat every day. In fact, we're probably chatting about 5 minutes before I hopped on here. It's just kind of a constant thing. We'll throw our artwork at each other for critiques. And so then he started his card set, Wizard of Oz, which of course I jumped right on board. Yep, there's some of my cards. That's a small section. I did a lot of cards for the Wizard of Oz set. That was actually,
I can find everything. I'm only human. That's all I'm gonna say.
So that, I'm looking at what you have up there. That was round 2. I think I did somewhere between 60 to 80 cards for the set total.
And the Wizard of Oz has been around forever too.
It has been. It was so much fun. I ended up buying some of the books to find really weird characters, and I would flip through the book and just drop my finger on a page randomly, and then I'd read and all right, that's the character I'm doing now. And that's kind of how I made it through 60 to 80 cards. But so we worked on that one together, and then we started doing other projects together. We've done a lot of things that I've taken one of my drawings, he's inked it, and then I've colored it. We've even done that with some sketch cards. Next set after Wizard of Oz, I don't know if you have images of it, was the pulp set is called Sexy Scary Space, which was all like pulp
Don't
covers.
have images of that one, so
Hmm?
my bad.
The what? You got
My
that
bad.
one? You got that one ready to go?
I don't.
What?
I know. I'm so bad today. I'm so bad.
Oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. Cut. No, no. So yeah, the pulp set, I actually did some drawings, and he inked them, and I colored them for some of the core cards, and of course I did a gazillion of the sketch cards. For that one, the sketch cards were actually, and I don't remember what it's called, but they were even smaller. I can actually show you what size they were because I have some right here. Oh, this is a whole pack of them, but that is the size of the cards. It's a third of a sketch card.
And that's important. And Rusty does things a little bit different.
He does. He always wants to. Every card set he does, he wants to do something he's never seen before. He always pushes into a new horizon with his cards. Wizard of Oz, he actually had cards that had pieces of a first edition Wizard of Oz book that had gone past its prime. Like he had actual pieces of the book as cards. He had relic cards, like little iconic items from Wizard of Oz. And then with the pop one, obviously the sketch cards were all. And he's going to kick me for not remembering the name of what those kind of cards are called. They're the extra small size. But we had all those, and he kept that set ended up growing because every time we hit another milestone in the crowdfunding, he'd add more cards and add more cards. I think that set like consumed him a lot. And then COVID-19 happened during the printing process, which delayed the set because printing houses were shut down. But then he got back on his feet with this dinosaur set, which there's all kinds of awesome stuff with this one. There's postage stamps from around the world that have dinosaurs on them. There's fossils. You can actually get megalodon teeth on cards. There's all kinds of cool stuff, and just like an amazing variety of different artists and the different styles. Sketch cards. I think you can still look it up if you go to Indiegogo. I'm sure he talked about it when he was on your show, that people can still order card sets for that set.
Yeah, I think for a while you can, and it might be coming to an end soon.
Yeah.
I know that I ordered something off of it about 2 or 3 days later, but I don't know how much because I don't want to misspeak or misdirect people.
I think it's still up. I think because every once in a while he'll tell me, "Oh, we got another boost," but I haven't. So I think it's still out there. If you can't find it on Indiegogo, it's called the Earth Trembles card set on Indiegogo. If you can't find it there, you can find Rusty on Facebook. Just type in Rusty Gilligan. You can find him and ask him, and I'm sure he'll find a way to get you a set.
So yeah, or he'll direct you somewhere.
Right.
Because I know a bunch of retailers picked up a few of them. So obviously,
yeah.
And so obviously there's a lot of cool stuff, and obviously dinosaurs are fun. And now we're gonna get to your comic stuff in 1 second, but I do have to mention my friend. He has a Kickstarter going on. My friend Taylor Campbell has an amazing Kickstarter going on, and it's called Kane. And Kane is perfect if you love supernatural, where it's basically focusing on a supernatural drama with action and horror, tons of ass kicking going on. And it's written by my friend, as I stated, Taylor Campbell, with art by Allison Shepard. And 50% of the profits from this project are actually being donated to a friend of theirs who recently passed away, and to her daughter's fund to help her daughter. They lost in February. And they're actually over 847% funded right now. And when they hit $1,000, so they're about $847, they're actually adding a bonus print in play. And so it's an amazing project. If you love horror, you love supernatural, and you're sick of waiting for supernatural to come, or you just want a bit of a break, this comic is perfect for you. Obviously, you can go check it out. This is the link right down there. All you have to do is type in Kane on Kickstarter, and you can go check it out. And obviously, having said all that, I do want to talk about your comics, and because backing out of the trading cards, you are also a comic artist, a comic writer, and
Yep.
a writer in general, and you started out in probably the most uncomic way possible with stage plays.
Yes. Uh,
So
yeah. So,
explain
well,
yourself, because
all right. I'll
clearly
explain myself here.
there are
I'll go
questions here
back.
you
In the
must ask.
beginning, I was a dungeon master, and anyone who plays Dungeons and Dragons knows the dungeon master creates the world, tells the story that the players play in.
You haven't watched one of my past interviews, have you?
So you have no idea what a dungeon
You
master
don't know
is.
who was on my show, do you?
I don't, other than Rusty.
So do you know who Santine Phoenix is?
Yes.
She was just on my show with her husband.
Nice.
And she was on my other show, and the story between her is that I did a written interview with her. Then she was in DC, and we were hanging out in a museum together. And then I got to interview her again, and I interviewed her just for the second time live. And we were speaking about her Kickstarter that did really well. So and she's gonna shoot the name, kill me because I forget the name. And I think
Your turn not to remember a name.
I know. I'm sure I'm gonna get yelled at for it. I think it's like Bardo Savalta, I want to say, or Savatia. Really cool. It's an awesome, like 4th or 5th generation D&D, or 4th, 5th engine D&D. I'm not a big D&D player, but continue about being a dungeon.
I guess that's where I started telling stories. But then, as I got into high school, and I discovered that the chorus was a great place to be vastly outnumbered by girls.
Yeah, exactly, because Dungeons and Dragons doesn't get the
does
girl.
not do that. No. So I ended up getting into chorus, and in turn into musical theater. And being the only straight guy in my chorus and musical theater benefited me very well.
I didn't have that gift. I'm not musically talented.
I wasn't either, but I was able to fake it well enough. They really needed guys. So I got into theater that way. And then over time, I got a boring retail job. And on weekends, which I always took because it was time and a half, we'd get maybe 2 customers all day. So after I was done the things in the store that I could possibly do, I would end up writing. I started writing a play called Bloodline. It was like a 35-person play. Everyone had a part. It was a straight play, and then sometime after, I got involved with a theater group back in my hometown when I left college, and they decided, oh, we need a show to do in between big name shows, and I was like, I got a show, so we did it. And it got. I guess the only complaint was it was kind of like Lord of the Rings, where it was long. It was like a 3.5 hour show. But people enjoyed it a lot. It was easy to follow, and it propelled me into writing a sequel, which we then did about 1.5 years later with a cast of about 65 people. Because the people who saw the first show wanted to get involved in the new show. So I could have armies, which the show actually wanted armies, so it really worked out in my favor. That was the first time I had understudies for every part. It was great. It was a little stressful because it was so many people, but it was great. But that's kind of how I caught the writing bug. After that, I ended up writing a musical, which is published through Baker's Plays. I don't know if you can even get it anymore because I think it's been stagnant for a decade or so at this point. But I wrote a musical with a friend of mine who's a musician, which helps a lot when you're writing a musical. I'm
a big Gilbert and Sullivan fan, so
me too. I've been in Pirates of Penzance about 6 times. I've been Pirate King. I've been the Sergeant. I've been Frederick. I've been in the Ensemble.
I was in the Gondoliers and the Sorcerer.
There you go.
Really, really, really fun entire play. And I'm not musically talented. I'm not a theater actor. I was a political science major, which makes sense.
It's like the same thing,
Hey. Government. It's just an acting gig that pays you.
That's right. Those are the real actors.
A year and a book deal. So let's not kid ourselves here.
Yes. Sorry.
If you want a job where you don't really work, government's for you.
And you can be wrong almost all the time, and you
In
don't lose a
fact,
job,
in fact, you have to be wrong 110% of the time to be
which
qualified.
is actually difficult. I got that right. Oh crap. Anyway, back to we keep getting off of it, but all right. So I had this musical that was published, which was exciting, and I was doing portraits, murals, book covers for other people, occasional children's book work, just little things here and there. And then I was on a family trip to Disney, um, some years back. At this point, about 15 years back, and I was just thinking to myself when we walked around, I'm like, they always have to find a fairy tale to retell. Why can't they just write a new one? And then I thought to myself, why don't I just write a new one? So I did. My first novel that I self published was called Illweed, which is
Prince
four
Jaden,
pictures.
he's a good man. I did my homework. I do my homework on this.
Good. You're going to publish the cliff notes on Illweed?
They might have already been published. I'm just saying.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna have to Google this. Excuse me for a second here. Let's see. So that was my first soiree into self-publishing. I did it as a young adult book. It's actually about a fourth grade reading level. You could probably sit down and like binge read it through a day. It's just under 200 pages.
About that is that the average reading level in the United States is 7th or 8th grade level.
So they're already halfway there with this book. See.
So the reason why very successful politicians are successful is they speak a certain way that most people can understand
them. Yep.
And so when you use, if I want to agitate somebody, and I say this openly, I can use really big words, and it pisses people off. And if you don't believe me, watch Chris Jericho and Big Show when they were teaming up in WWE. They used certain words and big words purposely to irritate the fans to make them heels, and it works beautifully because it psychologically affects. But continue about this book. Sorry, I thought it was a great.
No, that's okay. So Illweed was my first self-published book. Then immediately following that, the exciting thing was there were actually some schools that started picking up that book, and all of a sudden I'd get like a sale of 30 or 40 books, and I was like, what's going on? What? And then I look into it, and like it's because somebody had bought it from me at a book fair or something, and they did a book report on it in school, and the teacher liked it, and the teacher decided we're going to do this as a class reading. Boom, the school.
So what is that like? Because it must be very cool.
It is incredible. I mean, I love it when people like connect to a picture. That's like I do artwork all the time, and I know people will, like a certain picture will speak to somebody, and they need a copy of it. They need to know more about it, and that's great. But if somebody can actually sit down and like immerse themselves in a world they've created for hours and hours and hours and enjoy it.
And also to even have a communal reading about it as well. Because when you're reading a book and you have 25 kids in a class or 20 kids in a class and they're all reading it, it must be very cool for you when all of a sudden you're like, oh man, some teacher wants to do a class book report on this, and they're all reading it, and then they're all having a discussion.
Right, and I kind of wish I was a fly on the wall there. I would love to know what was discussed.
But like it changes because it's now your work is being read and pushed forth and all that stuff, and it's very cool in a lot of ways.
Yes, it is. Yeah. It's under its own. It's the first time that something that I worked on is under its own steam going somewhere, like without me pushing it there,
And then also, chances are that the next, year the teacher might do it again because
they have that collection of books now, until they fall apart, which sometimes takes only like half a semester, but
I mean, I don't have kids yet, but I'm sure that when I do, they're going to be monsters.
Oh, terrible! I'm going to have to buy them at least 2 copies of Illweed.
So having said all that, and then obviously after this, you then sort of, we're obviously doing some comic work while this was going on. But
no, I had never done any comic work.
So
I had done book covers and illustrations, murals, portraits, regular commission kind of stuff. But I'd never drawn anything comic.
You to then go into comics with Autumn Gray.
So Autumn Gray was originally my second novel. And I was writing for an adult audience.
And you realized that you were going down the wrong path really quickly.
Well, I got to around 400 pages, and a lot of it, I had long commutes from what I was doing for my day job. And so I'd be thinking.
I was just saying that you got really lazy and you realized pictures are a lot easier to tell stories.
Well, that's exactly what happened. Is I lost track of what I had written versus what I had thought about writing. And I'm sitting there with 400 pages, and I'm like, I don't have time to sit here and reread this to figure out where I'm at. I just couldn't.
You didn't want to pull an Alan Moore in his latest book like 3 years ago. That's like his latest book is like 1,800 pages.
No, I don't want to do like the Song of Fire and Ice either. Like, never going to finish the series kind of thing either. But
and so what obviously you really were writing a lot and you lost track. You didn't want to reread it and sort of figure out how to get back on track.
And I've always been a visual person, so I always, like, everything I'm writing, I'm trying to put in words what I see in my head anyway. So I was just thinking, why don't I just draw it? So I sat down and I made I was like, all right, I'm going to take chapter 1 of my novel, and I am going to make a comic of it. I had not collected comics. My comic collection consisted of Garfield, Heathcliff, Calvin and Hobbes, and Far Side. That is everything I had on my shelf as far as comics go. So I went into comics with no influence from any comics. I had to like research like what size of the page is supposed to be in comics. Okay, so I made sure I made my proportions correctly, and I created my first comic, which my first chapter took 36 pages. I did not research that a standard comic is anywhere from 20 to 24 pages. So I have cursed myself with Autumn Gray issues are all 36 pages.
But that's more of an indie thing as well right now, where a lot of indie comics are saying
all different lengths.
You screw the 22, 24 page length, because personally, and look at comics today, a lot of companies like Zenescope, they call it a miniature graphic novel. Well,
right, they call it all kinds of things, but they're all different sizes now. Yeah,
I call it if it's not nicely bound, and even if it is and it's 60 pages, it's not a graphic novel. Everybody, I'm sorry, I'm about to ruin people's life.
No,
it's the idea that you just created a nice one shot, and there's nothing wrong with that. I like 60-page one shots. Don't get me wrong. But it's the idea that, obviously breaking the norm has now become normal in a lot of ways.
Right.
And even doing 36 pages and giving people more content, because obviously you started this, I think, in 2013. It was or 2014, around there, right?
Yeah, 2013, I think, is when I printed my first issue of Autumn Gray.
And so what was that like, really doing that? Because indie is not where it is today. I mean, indie is mainstream now in a lot of ways. So what was that like, really printing this and pushing it out there?
So I created my first comic, and I printed it up. I printed up the minimum off of a print-on-demand place. I think it was 20 copies. My parents bought a copy. My sister bought a copy. A couple of my friends bought a copy. And the rest of them kind of sat there for a little while. And I decided, well, I guess I shouldn't do that. I wasn't in the comic world. I didn't know what to do with it. And then a friend of mine who worked at a comic book shop told me about this thing I'd never heard of called Free Comic Book Day. And so they said, print up some more books. So I ordered another 20. So I had a box with about 30 comics in it. And I made a tablecloth and a little sign that had the name of the comic on it and everything. And I went to this comic book shop, and I sat down and I sold out of books in about an hour and a half. And that's how I caught the bug. So then I was like, oh crap, I got to get number 2 done. So suddenly I was looking at this massive novel beast, and I'm like, I got to figure out how I can tell this. I need to figure out how I can finish this so I can at least make like a cohesive story. So I broke down the main story into 10 chapters. I am currently working on 9. So I'm 9 and 10, and then that will be the graphic novel.
Before we get into that, because I'm curious, obviously I'm going to give a little bit back history, and you could, correct me. It's focusing on Kara Gray,
Yes.
and she's sort of a young girl who has very limited friends. She's a little bit awkward, and she sort of discovers a mystical world in what is known as.
She's dragged in. She grew up with an imaginary friend, who everyone just assumed was her imaginary friend. She's the only one that ever saw this person, and you just go play off in the woods with her. And her imaginary friend was actually real. The premise of the story is that there are fairies and monsters hidden among us. Yeah, the dogs are seeing people outside now.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. What? Anything could happen.
That's right. So fairies and monsters are hidden amongst us, and they cannot be found, because if they are discovered, they're basically punishable by death by their own kind. There's a whole story behind that, and why that's the way things are now with the fairy folk. Like they are completely hidden. But Kara gets dragged into basically a mass execution of the fairy folk. And that's kind of when the story falls from the imaginary friend cutesy story that it starts out as, and falls down the rabbit hole of fairy slaughter and using pets for different kinds of potions and people being hunted down for being affiliated. It turns into a whole rabbit hole of horror, basically.
And it gets a little bit more complicated than that. Where obviously,
yes,
there's people who want to obviously sort of come in.
That's my wife back there. Hi, honey.
and obviously people want to come in. People are using it somewhat politically. What's going on, and then chaos is ensuing in a lot of ways. And so it's a crazy story, and also some people who are close to Kara might not be the best people, and there's all sorts of stuff going on, and there's some deception.
So it sounds like you may have done some reading on this one.
I'm trying not to ruin anything, and I have a pretty good idea off of Comixology what's going on.
Did you pick it up on Comixology?
I picked up half of it.
So the 1 through 5, the first chunk.
Yeah. So
Cool.
I picked up about obviously there's a little more than half, so I haven't caught the other 3. Just because I don't want to spend all the money. So there you go. So, but I wanted to get a sense of it, and it goes down a very. I don't want to say it's dark but it's messed up. Is a good way to put it.
Yeah, it starts like I said. It starts out. You read the first issue, and you're like, oh, this is like a cute story about a girl and her imaginary friend.
It's not brutal in the sense that you're going to see blood and gore per se.
No.
It's more psychological, and you realize you're entering a world of a lot of stuff breaking down, and it's very interesting. And I have a pretty good idea of what happens just because the description, once you know what happens in issues 1 through 5, if you read the description of 6, 7, and 8 on Comixology, you can piece things together real quick. And I
may send you a couple links so you can check out the rest of those issues, get yourself caught up.
Yeah. No. I'm very, very excited for it. So obviously it's going to be really cool, and I have a pretty good idea where it's going. And obviously one of the cool things about this is that you did the writing on it, the art on it, the inking on it. I think you did a bunch of the covers.
This is the latest one.
And this is it nicer.
Oh, you got it right there. Ah.
I have this one too, and then this one, and then this one. I don't have all of them because I don't want to go overboard here with it. But obviously, this is the latest one.
That's the latest one. That's the one that came out last year. Yep.
And so, what was that like doing all of the work? Because I don't think you've done a variant cover, unless you have, and I missed it.
I did on the trade book, the one that you got on Comixology, the original. That was the first time I had another artist do the cover. David Leblanc, he's from Action Abstraction Studios. He was looking to get more involved in the comic world. He does a lot of like mosaic, like fine art paintings that are comic inspired and using parts of comics in them and stuff like that. But he wanted to get more involved in comics, so I had him do the cover for the trade. So that was the first time. That's the only cover I did not do, which I don't know. I guess you don't have the image of that, but this will be the one that he did right here, which is the trade cover of the one you have on Comixology.
And so obviously you mentioned that issues 9 and 10 are coming.
Yes.
And so obviously there's a lot of stuff, and I don't want to sort of state things for those who haven't heard of this, but there's a lot of stuff, and we're gonna be dealing with what's happening. And
yes. It's still gonna get a lot messier. Yeah.
Which is hard to believe because I have a pretty good idea how messy it's getting. But I don't want to push too hard into this, but I am curious because obviously we are now in an era of Kickstarter and crowdfunding and indie. Yes. And I haven't produced a comic yet. I have an idea, but either everybody's gonna love me in the comic realm when I drop it, or everybody's gonna hate me because they didn't think of it first. And I have a project that has to be launched first that is comic related, but it's not a comic book. And that's dropping in November for those, and there'll be more about that later in the next 2 weeks or so. But the idea is that what are you going to be doing with issues 9 and 10? Are you going to be crowdfunding it? Are you going to be kickstarting it? Or is it just going to be self-published through Eden Park and what you've done already for the other two?
So what I think I'm going to do is I think I'm just going to self-publish 9 and 10, and then I'm going to save the big Kickstarter for the complete set as one big hardcover book. Oh, hardcover book! We love hardcover books.
I do like hardcover books a lot.
Yeah, we do. One other thing,
people do too as well. I think a lot of people would prefer a hardcover.
Yeah.
I will only back hardcover books on Kickstarter. It is very rare I will back a softcover book because soft covers don't do it for me. I really like hardcover books.
So what
I look like some bookshelves. That's why.
So yeah, exactly, and I think 90% of my comic collection are hardbound, like collector's issues, not all the single issues. So I can watch them all lined up there. I'm like, yep, there's 1 through 11. Yeah, okay. So what I'm doing is, I'll probably do a Kickstarter when I complete it for the second trade book, which will be 6 through 10, which will be a paperback. And then I also want to have the tome of the entire story. So 36 pages an issue, 10 issues, 360. That's is that 360 pages? That is 360 pages.
Yes.
So that's a graphic novel.
That's like 2 graphic novels. That's an omnibus right there. That's a double pack.
So two things I definitely want to mention that now that we're on the Autumn Gray story and all that. Autumn Gray is the first of. It's actually there's a bigger story going on, which takes place over 4 seasons. So Autumn Gray is actually the first 10-book series. Then there's a winter, a spring, and a summer for the big story. And as soon as I find time to do it all, I'll get there. But right now I'm just trying to finish the Autumn Gray story.
which makes sense because that's a common problem in Kickstarter right now, where you have people who say, I want to do 15 stories, and they're doing one of each every month or every quarter. And my entire thing is that you should do one and then finish what you want to wrap up. I watch TV in that fashion also, where I'm on topic to do X. And that's the whole point, is that I'm going piece by piece. It makes no sense for me to say, hey, let me do issue 1 here, and then 6 months later I'm going to do another issue in another series. Complete the series, finish it out, and then work on your next one, because I want content. And it annoys me when creators do that. And I think it's a common mistake in comics.
Personally, I find it a difficult thing for me is my personal projects come after my paid projects. So what happens is Autumn Gray is always there, And in fact, I have like 4 other things on the always there list as well. I would love to be able to just shut out the rest of the world, get rid of the deadlines, and get rid of everybody else and all the other stuff, and just get those 2 issues done. If I was left alone for 2 months, I could finish Autumn Gray. I could even get it colored and have the trade ready to go. But it's just, I don't live in a world where I can just shut off everything else for 2 months. I mean, I got my sketch cards to do. I got my comics to color. I got commissions all over the place. I have artwork to do for all these different companies. I mean, I'm glad I have it, but Autumn Gray, you know, I'm lucky if I get it right now, if I get an issue a year. It's just the way it is. But
believe me, I'm the first person to know that I do 4 interviews a week. And right now I am gearing up to start a job, hopefully sooner. They're legitimately just waiting on some corporate paperwork. And this, I mean, the amount that I sacrifice to do 4 interviews a week, I prep up and all that stuff. Like, yeah, I'm lucky that if I get to watch 5 hours of television, no, not 5 hours, 5 episodes of an anime. Not 5 hours. 5 hours of
like I go to these conventions, like, oh, have you watched blah 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 yet? And most of the time, I'm like, no, I haven't. I got a TV. I only turn it on to play music on it because I'm usually just drawing.
I have not touched my Xbox since the middle of December. That is how swamped I am. I'm hitting, by the end of the night, I will hit 126 to 127 interviews by the end of tonight. That's a lot of.
It is a lot of interviews. It's exhausting.
And people think that it just happens. It doesn't just happen. I spent, 3 to 4 hours actually doing my homework on who you are. And I don't sit back.
You had some alcohol. You had to loosen yourself up. You have to deal with me. So, you had to get yourself ready.
Exactly. But the point that I'm trying to make is that it doesn't just happen. And that's something that I think people don't understand, is that producing a comic, and the reason why I bring all this up is that it takes a lot of time. People have day jobs. And also the idea is that if you want to not be poor and broke and actually have a future and actually retire with something decent in your pocket, or, have money to pay your health insurance, well, you need to take your paid gigs first versus your personal projects, second. And look at Scout. All the people at Scout, they all have day jobs. There's a reason why. Yep. It's one of 2 things, and not to bash Scout. I don't know if they're a client of yours, but I think it's no secret where, the only way that company is viable is that if everybody has a day job and then they do it on the side.
Right.
And
that's the way it is. You have to survive,
And then there's nothing wrong with that. I completely get it. And I commend people who do it. I mean, this isn't my day job. I would love it if it was. It took me 8 years to get a sponsor. So, I mean, and my sponsor is not, they pay for my streaming and a little bit extra and maybe a few equipment upgrades, but it's not enough to live on. Right. And it could take another 8 years for me to get, something that maybe gives me a car payment or 2 or 5 for the year at best.
Right. But the key thing for you, like doing these right now, is this is like the ultimate in networking. Like you get to bring people in from all different angles and you get to know them. And I'll tell you, like, until you're at the point where you're full-time doing this kind of stuff, the networking is, and it always is, like the most important thing. You need to talk to everybody. You need to.
I'm probably one of the only people in the entire comic community right now who said, I have never networked at a convention, and I probably know way more people than I want to. And I also know people from all over the world. Right. And in so many different sectors. And I don't know if I'm ever going back, because honestly, this is the ultimate form of networking, not to mention that I put it into groups and that there's about 150 more people that I've not interviewed that I'm in contact with beyond this because of this show in general. And so my network is huge because of it.
Just look at us. I mean, you talked to Rusty, and boom, now you're talking to me, and I'll send some other people your way, probably, and
I mean, I'm getting booked like crazy. Anybody who sends anybody my way, I appreciate it. I'm trying to get as many people in. Yep. It is insane. But enough about networking. It's super important. I think people need to, I think the 2 common mistakes that at least I see is people don't know how to network, and people don't know how to take care of their finances first and foremost before comics.
Right.
And I
know people that go to Comic Cons and they have to meet a certain number so they can pay their rent. And like, I couldn't enjoy a show if I went there with that stipulation, like that kind of pressure. Like, I have to make a sale or I'm not eating this week. You know, it's
I'm
like
crazier. I leave my charge card at home when I go to Comic Cons and my debit card. I have straight cash.
Yep.
It is straight.
Get rid of the temptation. Just get rid of it. Yeah. Well,
so,
I'm stuck behind my table at most shows, so like my temptation is basically, if I get a chance to chit chat with somebody, we might do like a barter, like I'll give you one of mine, give me one of yours.
No, it's not even that. When I go to a con, there's a battle plan. Every dollar has an assignment. So
do you do the you do the loop first? You travel around and look at everything?
I don't even do the loop.
Oh, you got to do the loop first. Because it might be something you never thought of that you're like, oh my God, I need that thing.
See, that's what's crazy though, is that I know exactly what I need. I go in, I get what I want.
Blinders on. You're that guy that walks by the table and does not
want a commission, right? I know how much my commission is going to cost because I already asked the artist and they're expecting me to show up. Then they have me on their list sometimes before I even have my list. Oh yeah, I already got you, man. No problem. And then I have $50 of fund money where I can blow on anything I want. But then I have my money for CGC, I have my money for autographs, and I come back with extra money in my pocket every single con. So I have $1,000, and I usually come back with about $100 because I had a mission and I had a goal. It is sick what I do, and it is so important to do that because guess what? Monday wakes up, I have no credit card bills, I have no debit card bill.
Yep, you didn't destroy yourself.
And I have no regrets because all that money was accounted for. And that's the point, is that people need to understand that if you take care of your finances and you take care of, just those two things and networking, you're going to be perfectly fine in this community. And people who are not doing well or are, barely making it, congratulations. That's the problem. I mean,
and it's that way in every industry, not just this one. But yeah, you gotta know where your limitations are and make sure you keep yourself from going past that.
And so obviously I want to touch on something as well. And obviously that's Eden Park and that company, because that's just an encompass of all your work.
Right. That's so in Autumn Gray, most of it takes place in Eden Park, which is the park that a lot of these fairies and creatures are hiding. And so I just decided I would take the name of that park and I would call that my publishing company. So Eden Park Tales is the name of my website. It's my publishing company. Anything underneath that name, I'm heavily involved with in one way or another. There are a couple of other comics on there that other people have written and I've done the artwork. But for the most part, it's all me. I also wanted to throw out there, I don't know if this is on your radar at all.
RPG?
It is on his radar. Yes, so Autumn Gray is turning into an RPG where you play fairies and monsters and you lurk in the human world. It's in its playtesting phases right now. I actually just finished a major revision on all the abilities. I've tried to keep it simple yet very customizable. Like basically, if you're creative, you could take any ability and just be like Lord of the World. But unfortunately, I'm going to be the game master during playtesting, and I can do the same thing with the ones that are fighting you. So, but the idea is that you create your own fairy creature, and there's like 40 or 50 different races, and you pick what element your character is going to be strong in, and that's where you start your shopping for abilities. And as you do things that please the queens or whatever you do to get, it's not experience points, you get ability points that you can build up abilities and gain new ones, and you can mix them and match them and create your own. Like you could have flaming snowballs if you want, whatever you want to mix together, you can make it work. It's a basic enough system that you can mix them without it being too confusing.
There's a lot of stuff coming down with this, and obviously if you enjoy and Autumn Gray, obviously you're going to be interested in this game, or you might be interested in the game and you want to read the comics, and obviously
right. They're going to kind of work in tandem with each other. I got to be careful with the game because I don't want anything in the game. There are things in the game book that will explain some of the things that haven't been explained in the comic yet, but don't really spoil the story. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, okay, so that's who that was. So later on, I'll already know who that was. Got it. Okay.
And so there's a lot of stuff that's going on with you.
There always is. There always is. There's all that. I have a video show that I'm supposed to be filming for a Roku channel. I've been doing a lot of voice acting. I'm art director on a movie. I'm going to be flying out for filming in a couple weeks for that because I asked them, instead of paying me this time to be the art director, fly me out there, give me a hotel, and let me get a part in the movie. So they agreed. So yeah, I always have a lot of things going on.
And so obviously, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on, and a lot of this is out on social media. Obviously, a bunch of it is just always out there, and I'm sure with this RPG, you're going to keep people informed as well.
Yes.
When it's dropping, how it's dropping, where it could be picked up, what it could work in tandem with, what it could be modified. Obviously, people who play RPGs, obviously, Sands Phoenix is a good example of this, where building and incorporating fourth engine and fifth engine D&D rule into it.
Yeah, on this one I created a whole new engine. I've done a lot of different RPG games. I've done Dungeons and Dragons. I've done Palladium. I've done so many different ones through the ages. The Mage series, White Horse, and so this is kind of like I took my favorite parts of lots of different games and kind of melted them into something that works in the world that I already created, and it's actually turning out really good. Like I've had, I think, 8 play sessions so far, and everyone's had, like, even like at the very beginning when we were discovering all the big problems in it, we had a lot of fun. So I'm like, that's the most important part. Like it's been fun. Right now I have a party of a Gorgon, which is a Medusa, a garden gnome. Well, he's a gnome that wants to be a garden gnome, and a newt that are currently really pissing off a bunch of goblins and a dwarf compound. They actually stole the crown from the dwarf for bad reasons, and now they're being hunted by giant hamster armadillos. It's a great time,
Well, I'm a goblin player, and I have a goblin.
You can be a goblin. You can be a goblin. You can be a troll if you want.
I'm sick. I have a sick goblin deck in MTG. I'm just letting you know, it kills people in 5 turns or less. It's that good of a deck, and it's not.
Oh, in your magic deck.
Oh my God, you should see it. When you're going up against elves or goblins or angels in MTG, if your deck is built correctly, it is savage. It is savage. 5 turns or less, I will kill you. It is sick if we're playing 20 life. It is a sick game. And a funny story, quick, and it's like 45 seconds. I had 8 campers versus me and somebody else who had a death deck. And we had 8 campers who each had 20 life apiece. And me and this other kid, this other counselor, destroyed them in about 12 turns. And in 160 life versus 40 life, and it was brutal. It was brutal. So I love my goblins. They pillage villages. I'm totally cool with this. So having said that, obviously I want to back out, and I am curious, where do you think the future of indie comics is? And I know you're relatively new, and you're really still producing your first one, and you're going to be wrapping it up sooner. But obviously it is very interesting. Trading cards are sort of a cousin of comics in a lot of ways, especially sketch cards. And so I'm curious where you view all this going, because the world's gotten a lot bigger, and obviously crowdfunding and indie comics has changed dramatically, and you've lived through a bunch of these changes.
Right. Well, I think the first thing is that thanks to digital, anybody can produce. I mean, this goes way beyond comics. This is everything. Like you can, thanks to the web and the digital world, you can produce anything you want and send it out to see if people want it. It used to be before the internet, you had to get in with a publishing house of some kind because you didn't have access to print anything. You didn't have access to distribute anything. You know, it was you had to get involved with like a Marvel or a DC or a White Horse or Dynamite or basically you had to find somebody that could do that for you. But now, thanks to the internet and the speeds of internet that you can watch things,
or my sponsor, Mixum. You could print your books yourself.
or you can print them. Well, that's the whole thing. You can print everything yourself now. You can ship everything yourself now. So the indie world basically has let everything in, and there's so much of it that it's finally competing legitimately with things like the comic world of Marvel and DC. Not so much the movies, because obviously Joe Schmo does not have the budget to make a Marvel or DC movie. If he does, then have at it.
But I would make the argument that something like Dynamite, Valiant, they're not competing necessarily against, Endgame Avengers, but Dynamite either just sold the rights to, Vampirella or Red Sonja, and it's a big deal. And that happened, I think, a few months ago. You look at something like Jupiter Legacy on Netflix, and while you could not like Jupiter Legacy, it is competition to Marvel for the first time, and indie is getting into that, and a bunch of indie stuff is getting signed. I mean, look at Gun Honey or Honey Gun,
right? Or they're making a TV series for Bone,
or Stray Dog.
There's so many, or The Boys. There's just all these non-mainstream. They're getting footing in the filming industry because people are looking for something that breaks the mold. That's just it's great, and it's also tough because originally, like, if you were an indie, you were competing against Marvel and DC. You're competing against these big monsters, but now you're competing against. And I shouldn't say it's competing because you're looking for your niche is what you're doing, looking for your way in. Everybody can go through the door now,
It's also complicated because I was just in a debate, and I'm on the comic book investing side, and I personally think Stray Dogs. Somebody was like, "Oh, I expect this to be a $500 to $700 book in a few years," and I'm saying to myself, "Look, not to say Tony Fleece hasn't done a great job with it, and that Stray Dogs isn't a good comic." But the problem is that there's everything now is out there, and everything gets us super hyped up the second it gets signed. Gun Honey, I think it is, and I'm really excited for that series. It's a 4-part, mini-series by Titan, and the 4th issue just dropped for pre-order today. And obviously Comic Minute and a bunch of other companies are picking up variants for issue 1 right now. What's going on is that got licensed and signed for a TV show. So everything is getting licensed, which means that a bunch of stuff is going to get a pop, and it's just a matter that I also think everything's going to fall down again. And that's the other thing too. Just because everything's getting signed doesn't mean everything's going to be good. It doesn't mean that it's going to stay good, because in TV they will spend $30 million on a TV series if they want to, and if it sucks, well, great. I look at Jupiter Legacy; they spent millions. Netflix.
They did, yep, and it got canceled after the first season, yep.
But and then I made the argument with Jupiter's Legacy, and I said, look, it's a great move for Netflix, because guess what? They own those 8 or 10 episodes. It doesn't matter anymore that they spend millions, because in 5 years from now, they just own 10 episodes of something, and then they produce enough of that, and they produce 100 series. Well, now you have 1,000 episodes in your library that you own. So if you're looking at it from a small position like that on content production, if Netflix spends $20 billion every single year. If they spend $100 million to produce Jupiter Legacy, that's like pennies for them. That's pennies to own it in perpetuity. So, but I think a lot of stuff is hyped right now.
Well, I think the best way to determine, wait 10 years and see what we still remember. Like that's the way it always is. I mean, people are always hyping, like even back in the 80s and 90s, hyping certain events in comics, and sometimes. Yes, they end up being big deals because we still know what they are. Like they're still trying to make a Dark Phoenix movie that works, like Dark Phoenix did back in the comics. I think it's just you got to right now everybody wants to push whatever they have as the biggest and best thing all the time. But you gotta, like I said, wait 10 years and then see what's stuck, see what you remember versus what just gets thrown aside. Like I just thought of like John Carter. They had that big, huge budget movie that, what was that, 5 years ago?
I don't even remember it.
I was watching it. I'm like, this is really well produced. And I went and looked. They spent a fortune on this, and it completely bombed. Like it's just, it's funny what sticks and what doesn't. You know.
It's so odd and so weird
And it can be the dumbest little thing that makes it work or not. You know, and you never know what it is, which is part of the game, I suppose.
There's so many good things out there, and I'm not a huge Ty Lopez fan, but what he says is that all the good books in Barnes and Noble are in the corner of Barnes and Noble in the self-help section, which is in the corner of the store, and the book that has been sitting on the shelf for 3 years is the best book to pick up. And I think it's the same thing with comics, is that all the good stuff that is going to stand the test of time and be the best stories is always passed over because it's not put out first.
Right. But and anything that you collect when it comes out isn't going to be worth what they act like it's going to be because everyone's collected it. The stuff that's worth a lot is stuff that nobody saved.
Or was passed over, and then people are like, oh man, this is really good. Right.
Yep.
Yeah. It's super interesting. But having said that, obviously we could go for another hour easily, but I don't want to. I actually have another guest in like 20 minutes, which is really
oh my god. Well, hi, other guest.
I double up. So obviously though, I am curious, briefly, what is your opinion about conventions and where they're going and COVID for the rest of the year, as well as even going further outward? Because obviously COVID, not to get too political, it is going to be very difficult. And I'll give a little insight into the wrestling world, is that a bunch of wrestling shows that I know have canceled their stuff in November and December because they're concerned and they don't want to put their staff at risk and their wrestlers at risk. And for all we know, tomorrow could be solved. In a month from now, it could be solved. But there's a lot of concern that's going on.
Right. There's a lot of money in these events, and it's tough to predict what the COVID thing is going to be like in 3 months.
And also, New York Comic Con is going to be a big test on if that con is successful, if dealers are successful, because that's the other thing. If guests are happy, especially when you're spending money. Also, how much money people have.
So far with the shows, I have to say I've made and people I've talked to have made real good money. I think it's because a lot of people that go to shows haven't had shows in a year and a half. So they're showing up with a year and a half worth of saved up convention money. Like, how you said you show up with a certain amount for your show. So suppose, you didn't go to any shows for a couple of years, and you show up at the show with, 3 years worth of shopping money ready to go. Shows have been very good. The crowds have been pretty big. There's been a mix of masks and not masks. I guess it depends on the show. I know some shows are going to require proof of vaccination to allow people in. And that's always a fine line where legally, I don't know how they can demand someone to show a medical record. But I also understand this from the safety side of it. So it's kind of like, I don't want to get political with it either, but
it's also tricky because if you're a cosplayer, well, a mask ruins your cosplay in a lot of ways. And also, I know people who go to cons and all they want to do is take pictures with cosplayers. Like, this is what I did, and they're thrilled because somebody looks like Princess Peach, or somebody looks like Scorpion from Mortal Kombat, and now you can't take a picture next to the person because of COVID, and it's just it ruins a big experience for a lot of people. And I know that I don't know how it's going to play out. And I
guess right now it's kind of state to state as far as what's required, as far as some places are requiring the social distancing, some places aren't, some even not even state to state, but just convention locations have different requirements. Some of them require masks, some of them don't.
Yeah.
And some people are comfortable with masks and some people are not. It's scattered right now. But I think in general, people want them. The people that like conventions want them and are trying to find ways in general, like there are always exceptions, are trying to find ways to make them happen.
Yeah, no. I think
try to get to them.
Yeah, I think people are trying to make it happen, and I just think that it is going to be very much trial by fire to figure out the solution.
I don't think COVID's ever going to go. I think it's going to be another flu. It's going to be part of the cycle because it's going to keep evolving, and something's going to find a way to get past.
Where we all have herd immunity. It's just a matter of how we get there, whether it's through vaccinations or natural.
It's going to be a mix. It's going to be a mix, and that's just the way it is. And the whole idea is to try to minimize the people that would really be in jeopardy about getting it, trying to minimize how many of them get it. Now are we getting political? Is that what we're getting here?
No, we're not getting political.
We're just getting medical.
Yeah, we could get political, medical, get in between. But no. The reason why I bring this up is because obviously everybody has a different view of it. I'm obviously in Connecticut. I'm personally just letting the dust settle because I have no idea what this landscape looks like and economically how it looks like. And also, I'm a panelist and I don't know how it looks from a perspective where if they cut my attendance in half, it becomes not a good speaking engagement to capture people and funnel people into my podcast. Because now I go from 250 people down to 120. That's the other thing that, like I'm saying, how is this all going to look? But again, I'm just letting the dust settle because I don't know how it's looking. And I think it's a fair position because what I'm selling is trying to get you like my Facebook page. And so I'm not selling you a physical item, but my whole thing is I want to speak to 10,000 people, so I capture 400. And that's where I'm at. But I digress right there. And I want to get away from being political and all that stuff and business-oriented. And I do want to give you an opportunity to self-promote because I know you got a lot of stuff going on. There's a bunch of stuff happening. And so where can people find you? Where can people pick up, different issues? Obviously, Comixology is a big place. Digitally. I know that you have the graphic novel for sale on your website and a bunch of other stuff. I think the link's up above in the description for those who are watching. And so where can people find you and where can people follow you on social media and also support you and support what you're doing?
Sure. Well, you can obviously go to my website, EdenParkTales.com, which it says right there with my lovely name on the screen. I have a store there. I even have a gallery of artwork where you can order prints. You can always email me through Eden Park Tales as well. But if you want to get more up-to-date information about what I'm doing, social media is the way to go. You can look me up on Facebook. It's just my name without a space in it. My last name is spelled funny. It's Moors. So there are not a lot of them. So if you just type in Jay Mooers on Facebook, I'll pop right up. Send me a shout. You can also find Eden Park Tales on Facebook or Autumn Gray on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram, also Jay Mooers. I'm on Twitter as @Eden Park Tales. And I'm not on there as much as I should be. I just don't have time for it. Mostly Facebook and Instagram is where you're going to get the most up-to-date stuff. And best way to reach me, if anyone wants a shout out looking for sketch cards, if you liked any of the series that you saw, I have blanks for most of them. And I can do commissions. Send me a shout out, either email at jmoores@yahoo.com or go on Facebook and send me an instant message, what have you. I'm friendly. I'll talk. And my dogs might bark at you. It's okay.
And obviously, one of the things that I'm going to say and then just reiterate is that you have to support indie. And what that means is that you have to buy people's independent comics. You got to support them when they run campaigns, sketch cards, trading cards they worked on, projects that they've been a part of, you have to support. Obviously, if you like something and there's blank, cards, obviously commissions, things of that nature, because that is super, super important at this point. And that's a way to support people. Also, just following people on social media goes a long way. Tweeting out, because you never know who's watching, or sharing on Facebook. And all of a sudden, you know, somebody might be looking and say, oh man, this artist looks amazing. Let me see what's going on with it. You know, I'm friends with a bunch of people and I push things out, and it happens all the time. Someone's like, oh, you know, this artist, let me go take a look at their work. Oh, let me go book them on something. And it happens all the time, and it's so important at this point. So obviously buying things, getting commissions, getting things of that nature goes a long way. But even more importantly than that, and just as important, because obviously we all need money, we all want to eat, we all have bills to pay, but following people, because that goes a long way on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you know, Facebook pages and all that stuff. So obviously on that note, it's super important. Also, I am independent. I do have a sponsor. I do live reads. But beyond that, you can go buy me a coffee, everybody, because all that money goes right back into the show. You know, my sponsor, they pay for a lot of stuff, and they're making most of season 3 happen. But it's the idea that there's a lot of equipment and there's a lot of effort that goes into this, you know, camera, lighting, green screens. And I am far from, you know, all that stuff, because sponsors only go so far. So if you like what we do here, you can buy me a coffee, and it's a bunch of perks on there. And so that's super important. So obviously go do that. But if you're going to go do that, also go pick up a copy on Comixology, or a physical copy. You can pick up the graphic novel of Autumn Gray, and I don't think you will be disappointed, because I thoroughly enjoyed the first 5 issues, and there's a little bonus in there as well. So obviously on that note, I'm going to give you the final word.
Well, I was just going to add the comment. One thing that, you know, following is great and everything. One thing I love is feedback. Like, I sell books to people all the time. I sell comics. And I always tell them I would love to hear back from you. Even if you hate it, I would love to hear what you hated about it, because I want to know what resonates with people. So please, like, if you read something of mine, send me a shout out. Let me know what you thought of it. You know, tell me who your favorite character is. You know, anything. It just helps to know that people are engaged in what you're doing. You know, I spend a month making a comic that takes somebody, you know, 15, 20 minutes to really just kind of read. But it's good to know if they pick up something from it, you know?
Yeah, that is important. And I think that obviously, if you pick this up, seriously, go give Jay a feedback, a shout out, and tell him what you thought of it, whether you love it, hate it, or even where you think it's going, because that's so helpful. And I think I could never said it better myself. So on that note, I think that is a wrap.
Thank you, everybody, for hanging out with us.